With the announcement of the Sonic Godzilla comic book crossover, it's truly an exciting time to be a fan of both franchises. I was lucky enough to sit down with the crossover's writer, Nick Marino, and talk a little bit about this book. Let's get into it. Just before we get into the majority of the questions, just
Yeah.
for the audience, is because this will be probably my main audience's first time reading your work. Would you like
Okay.
to introduce yourself to the audience, just history of your work?
Yeah, let me give myself like a little. Is this a little better? What's going on with the hair here? It's got a little. Hold on, let's do that. There we go. Does he have? Oh no, that looks really weird. So my name is Nick Marino. I don't know how to use technology anymore. Dan was incredibly patient. Waited like 20 minutes for me to even figure out how to join this meeting. I write comics. I've been making comics for a really long time. I used to be a cartoonist. Now I'm just a writer. I just sent off the revised version of Sonic Godzilla #4. Is that good enough? Did I do good?
Yeah. So obviously the big news we're here to talk about is Sonic X Godzilla set to release summer 2026.
Oh my god, you just said the X. We just did a whole bit about not saying the X. Come on.
So
No, it's fine. I don't personally care. I feel like without the X is the way I'm supposed to say it. I don't know.
I get on people's nerves because sometimes I read X as against because of Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, and that one
Okay,
is alliterated
I
as.
rep that. But look, I need to be clear about something. All right. First of all, I just want to say I love the Sonic fans. You guys are amazing. You're so weird, and I'm all here for it. I am too. We go really well together. We're like peanut butter and jelly. But I do want to emphasize that this X is not an against. Okay, they're just trying to understand each other. All right, this X is more like it's a coming together. It's a union of not two beautiful souls. There are two beautiful souls in the title. All right, but there's a lot more beautiful souls in this story, all just joining each other, just trying to live their best lives. But there's one person who's really horrible at living their best life, because living their best life means ruining everybody else's lives.
So in the plot outline, it has been stated that Godzilla will be coming to Sonic's world. And
Yes.
just from that, it's safe to assume this is multiple universe stuff where Godzilla's crossing over to the Sonic universe.
Whoa! Whoa! Don't be putting words like that out here. Don't, Sega, if you heard that, you didn't hear that. No, it's not. How do I say this right? Yes, Godzilla will be going to Sonic's world.
Okay. So we don't know, because that was a thing some people were wondering if it was cause sometimes with Godzilla crossover stuff, it's like, well, he's always been here. Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay. No, I like that idea. I don't think that one ever crossed my mind. It just didn't seem like it. I don't know. How would I build in like an ancient lore? Like Godzilla just always been there. That's kind of what they did in the Turtles one, isn't it? That they've gone on.
I believe so, and I was also thinking Marvel Godzilla built in him just being yeah, he's been here.
Well, Marvel Godzilla is a weird thing because technically speaking, Godzilla was in the Marvel universe in like the 70s and the 80s, so that's a whole other thing that I podcasted about before, oddly enough, because he did there was a backdoor Iron Man Godzilla crossover that didn't really work out. Yeah. Anyway, no, Godzilla has not always existed in Sonic's world.
Okay.
I mean, now that you mention it, it's not a bad idea, though.
But for now, we'll assume he's a new arrival.
Excuse me, it. No, I can't say he. You can say he as much as you want.
Okay. So, you're working with IDW Sonic regulars Jack Lawrence and Reggie Graham, who are on art and colors respectively, and you did post a small preview of their work. Can you tell me a bit about the collaborative process between you three on this project?
Well, so the collaboration's like this. Jack is amazing, Reggie is amazing, and I'm just doing my best to give them cool stuff to do because they are just so talented. I cannot wait for people to see what Jack has done with Station Square. It's unbelievable. I've been so fortunate in my Godzilla work so far. I had Sean Dove on my Biollante Vs Destroyah story, who really embraced the concept of drawing Pittsburgh in a way that they were actually, for a bit, they were concerned. They were like, I think you're drawing too many of the buildings too realistically shown. Like, we're worried we could be in legal trouble, I guess, because apparently you can trademark a building's design. I don't really know about that, but it all worked out. Sean did a wonderful job, and then Jack has just kicked it up to another level with Station Square. And the truth is, I haven't even seen all of how Jack's going to approach it. Like, I've seen parts of the city, but there's a very big part that's featured in our final act that I haven't seen yet, and I can't wait to see what Jack does. But this man is an absolute beast on the architecture. Like, I just feel like I'm right there in the city with the characters, and it's so amazing. Now, what Reggie's doing is, oh man, how do I describe this without giving too much away? Reggie is like, I love Reggie's color palettes, right? It's like they're so rich and, to me, really immersive in the way that I want in this kind of story, where it captures some of the realistic qualities of a city, but you're in Sonic's world and you can feel the kinetic colors. You can feel the sort of, I don't know, the way the sky sits on top of everything. It just looks so good. And in my scripts, my fourth one that I was just sending along as we were starting to record, there's a change in the time of day, and I'm so excited to see what Reggie's going to do. And that process has been really fun working with Reggie on that, because Reggie was like, hey, previously asked me, are there any changes to time of day? And I was like, nah, it doesn't really hit till 4, but like, thank you for letting me know how much you're looking out for that, because I'm really going to emphasize that when I do my revisions, and I have. And so I'm thrilled to see how those two handle changes in weather and changes in, from day to night and night to day. It's going to be so amazing. Yeah, it's great. I was on this project for a long time, and we sort of knew Jack was going to be there with us, but I didn't have the opportunity to really discuss what kind of script Jack needed before I wrote the first one. I wrote it, and then we were like, okay, then we'll lock down that it's going to be Jack. And when Jack did read my first script, I was so thrilled, and hopefully Jack still feels the same way. I was so thrilled to get the feedback that Jack really felt like he could play with the spectacle and grandeur that this story requires. So all in all, I'm feeling great about the collaboration. I think those two are fantastic. Ed Dukeshire is going to be our letterer. I worked with Ed on a Power Rangers story last year, and it was really great. Also, Ed founded Digital Webbing, which was a huge part in my development as a comic creator. So I really appreciate him for that. So yeah, all in all, between them and my editors, Tia and Bixie, I mean, I just feel like I've got such a good team on this, and I'm so lucky.
And you stated on Twitter that this project was initially pitched 4 years ago in 2022. Can you take us a little bit inside the pitch process? Was it like an idea that came to you, or was IDW actively courting crossovers from writers, or?
No, this was a really odd, specific circumstance. I had previously, at IDW, I first started working with editor Jasmine Joyner, which had been a friend of mine previous to them getting their job with the publisher. And at about a year and a half, I think, into their time there, they decided that they wanted to move on and do something else. And so they've come up with a presentation that was like their final, this is what I've been developing the whole time, Godzilla presentation. So Jazz and I had developed the Biollante Vs Destroyah story together. And Jazz had something else of mine that did get slightly scripted and did get concept art done for it, but Toho said no to it. That was included in that presentation, right? And maybe if we're lucky one day, I can talk more about that, but I can't say anything else about that, for now. But they showed me some other parts of the presentation, because we were just generally talking about the presentation after it had already been sent over to IDW. And I was like, what are you excited about? And Jazz was like, oh, I just put some stuff in the end, Now, I don't know where the idea originated from. I don't know if it was Jazz. I don't know if it was somebody else at the publisher. Maybe that's been kicking around for a long time. Maybe Sega requested it. I can't say. But basically, at the end of the presentation, there was a slide, like a PowerPoint. And it just said, Sonic X Godzilla ? And I was like, who's writing that? Because I love talking animals, and I love monsters, and I don't know, it just seemed really exciting, seemed really fun. And Jazz was like, no one. I was just throwing it out there to see if, that's something they wanted to do. And I was like, could I pitch it? And Jazz was like, all right, yeah, you can give it a shot. So I did a call with Jazz and David Marriott, the longtime Sonic editor. And it was a really rocky call. I remember it was August 31st, 2022. I remember it very well. Because to be honest with you, like, I still had a lot to learn about not only how to bring this concept to the publishers in the correct way, but about both the worlds of Sonic and Godzilla. There's a lot of nuances and technicalities to them, and you can be as much of a fan as you want, but that doesn't always equate to knowing how to posit your story in the right way to get it picked up. But they were both very patient with me, and they let me keep developing it. Jazz left shortly after that, and then David became the Godzilla editor. So David was our dual editor for a time on the pitch. But it just, with David, it never really fully came together. I don't know how much of it Sega actually saw during that time. But when David left IDW, I believe at the end of 2023, Tia, and I'm always a little unsure how to pronounce Tia's last name. I think it's Tia Shook. I'm not totally sure. But Tia, I need to ask actually. Tia became the new Sonic editor. And shortly after there, Bixie became the new assistant or associate editor, probably associate, I would imagine. And yeah, we've been really hunkering down on this thing for the past couple of years to get it done.
So this one, you might not have an answer to this one, but sometimes when I talk to writers that I know in the industry, they often tell me about, like, they include some wild stuff in their pitches that is like, this is never going to get in, but I might as well try. And sometimes they get surprised, like, oh, this got approved, without giving anything away. Was there anything like that you included in your initial pitch?
Well, the initial pitch is just a light years away from what we're with now. I feel like I probably shouldn't say anything because, I made the mistake of like emphasizing the humans thing. I feel like, and it really wasn't a big deal. I just hadn't been scripting any humans, and people online were like, there are no humans. And I was like, well, it's just not my priority. I'm sorry, guys. Like, I know they could be there, but they just don't happen to be in this circumstance. And I feel like if I start to talk about what could have been in some of those early versions, I don't want like people to feel like they're losing something, because the real truth is I think what we have now is incredibly strong, and it's really playing to my artists' strengths in terms of what they can immerse you in visually. So I don't want people to be worried about what wasn't there, but I will say we did try out a lot of different characters in this from the Sonic cast. We tried out a lot of different kaiju who might fit into it, and eventually we settled on the core that people have already heard about from the announcement. And I feel pretty good about that. I took a lot of big swings throughout the course of this thing in terms of things I thought would be really fun to get away with, because that is one of the joys as a comic book writer, is to really put some completely I don't know what you would say implausible stuff into it. And at this point, I have worked on it so much, I'm not really sure what is considered the wildest thing anymore. But wild stuff that was cut, I don't know. I don't want to say anything, because what if we get to do more of this? Maybe I'll get to do that stuff then.
I would like Sonic Godzilla too. I think that would be fun already.
I would love to do it. We'll see what happens. I mean, I'm so encouraged by the response that we've gotten. I feel like fans really get it. They really understand what we're trying to go for here. And yeah, I'm excited to give them more of that. So hopefully, once we get our orders in on the first issue, that might be something that we can start considering. We'll see.
So we have talked, you've written a Godzilla comic before, Godzilla Rivals, Biollante Vs Destroyah, which I've said I really enjoyed. I really like that one.
Thank you.
You were also an assistant colorist on Monster Island Summer Camp.
Yep.
But this will be the first official Sonic comic you're working on. So just out of curiosity, what is like your personal experience with the franchise, whether it be as a fan or just an observer of it?
Well, growing up, I didn't have a Sega. Sorry, Sega. Apologies. But I did play a whole lot of Sega at my friends' houses, and I played a lot of Sonic 1 and Sonic 2. That was like a staple for my age, because I'm kind of like an 80s/90s baby. I'm in between the two. So that was really right at the sweet spot for me. I think I was like 10 when Sonic first came out. So yeah, that was a big staple of my youth, participating in that stuff. But I would say that it wasn't something that I necessarily expected to end up writing or spending this much time with. But over the years, of course, I've played a ton of different Sonic games. I've seen the movies. I really like the third film quite a bit. Shout out to that Amy ending. That was really good. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just like a casual Sonic fan, I guess you could say, who's spent a lot of time doing my best to honor the really deep fandom that's out there and bring them a story that's entertaining, that feels rich, that feels right to them.
And just some more questions so Sonic fans can get to know you a little better. What's your favorite game in the franchise?
Probably still Sonic 2, to be honest with you. I did a playthrough of that a few years ago on my, I don't know, my PS3 or something like that. And granted, remember, a few years ago for me is like could be up to a decade ago. But I think it was in this room I'm in now, so it couldn't be longer than 5 years ago. But yeah, I did a playthrough on Sonic 2, and I loved it. It was great. It was so much fun to mix the nostalgia with the levels that I hadn't been to before. That was great. So yeah, I'm kind of an old school guy. Don't know what to say. Sorry. It's probably always going to be Sonic 2.
And favorite character by any chance?
So when I started this project, I would have told you it was Knuckles, right? I love the Knuckles TV show. I love Knuckles in the movies. Always like to play with Knuckles. But I would say that really, in the process of writing this, Amy's become my girl. And to the point where I now have an Amy tattoo. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Is this visible? This is Jack Lawrence art, not from
wow.
our story, from a different issue that Jack did. It's hard to display it because of where it is on my arm. But yeah, I'm really like I'm all in for Amy at this point, basically.
Amy's one of my favorites too. Amy and Shadow are my two favorites.
Shadow's great. Shadow, you know what? Shadow was a very early favorite of mine in the writing process of this, and he is so difficult to write that now he's been slightly demoted in my favorites. But yeah, I love Amy to pieces. I think she's great. I am so excited to do more with her, and I hope that when people read this, they really enjoy what we've done with her in this.
And with Sonic Comics in particular, did you start your experience with Sonic Comics with IDW, or have you seen the older stuff with like Archie and Fleetway or anything like that?
I know the old stuff. I've been with my earliest memories of comics, predate. My earliest experience with comics predate my ability to create memories. So I've always been around the Sonic comics, but I really am typically as a reader a superhero guy. That's kind of my bread and butter. So that was my main focus as a reader. And yeah, I've seen all the stuff. I did not really dive head first into Sonic comics until I was actively pitching and developing this project.
So similar question for Godzilla, with it being such a varied franchise, not dissimilar to Sonic, but definitely longer running. It feels like everyone has a different introduction and connection to the franchise. Could you tell me a little bit about your introduction to that series?
So Godzilla, like, I didn't really grow up around Godzilla. It wasn't like very accessible for me where I lived, the different places I lived. And I knew the movie when it came out in '98, the American one. I actually really liked that cartoon show that they did.
I like that one a lot too. I like
I thought
Zilla
it was
Jr.
really
a whole
fun.
lot.
Yeah, even in my late teens, I really devoured cartoons voraciously because I wasn't sure. I was like, am I gonna make comics? Am I gonna be an animator? I didn't know. So I was really watching all of the cartoons at that time, and I liked that Godzilla cartoon. Was it Godzilla the animated series?
Yeah, I think it's called Godzilla the series. I love that one
Oh,
to
the series.
pieces.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, it's fun. I know the design gets some hate, but it's kind of cool actually. I think, like, I don't know. Anyway, uh, I I wasn't a big Godzilla head until I got married to Rosie Knight, who wrote Godzilla Monster Island Summer Camp, and Rosie is a huge Godzilla fan, so that became a big part of our relationship. And I really learned about Godzilla, and then had the opportunity to pitch on Godzilla Rivals and got deeper into it. And yeah, I love Godzilla. It's great. What a great and what an exciting time to be a Godzilla fan. Like, everything's coming together more than ever before. I really feel that way with Sonic too, but I do have to say, because most of my deep relationship with Sonic stuff has been as a writer. I haven't had like a really like deep adult fan resurgence with it. I don't quite perceive it in the same way. I don't know all of the, let's say, talking points that people have for how they feel about the direction Sonic's going in. But I feel like both of these things are just getting so much incredible stuff right now
Yeah,
It's a good
definitely.
time.
So similar questions that I had for Sonic about Godzilla. Favorite movie in the series?
My favorite is Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, the first one.
I love that one a lot too.
Yeah, I would say my second favorite. I don't know. I changed my mind a lot. I was really into GMK for a while. I really like Tokyo SOS. No, my second favorite's probably Biollante, Godzilla versus Biollante. That's a really special film. A lot of heart. But I love the crossover ones, and that's kind of what ended up, my love of like GMK and Tokyo SOS. And I think there's one other one I was pulling from. I said when I was filling out that press release questionnaire or whatever when we first announced it. But yeah, those ones were big for me when I was imagining the kind of kaiju action we could see here. Because it's like you can have two monsters fight each other. That's cool. And obviously Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla too, because of the great Godzilla, King Caesar, and Mechagodzilla fight. But having three of them fighting each other at the same time, you have to really think differently about where are their attacks going, where are they in terms of like they're huge, right? So
Yeah.
you got to consider like who's in the sky, who's on the ground, is someone in the water, like who's way up in the sky, like there's so many like different tiers to trying to put together in your head where these are, so you can describe this effectively to your artist. That like having those movies as part of my fandom for the characters, the kaiju, the Toho kaiju, was really effective for me because it gave me a little bit of a like inspiration to work off of.
Favorite monster in the series?
Oh, this is a tough one for me. I think I'm just a King Caesar guy. There's nothing I can do about it. I
He's
just love
really
King
fun.
Caesar.
He's very
He's so
underused.
he's like a Muppet, and I just love that. Like he's just like a floppy ass Muppet. Like cool. And I love Biollante. I think the concept behind Biollante. So if there's anyone here who's been reading my stuff, which I don't expect you to have done per se, but you will see a lot of threads that would be like, well, of course this dude loves Biollante. Like my Transformers story I did a few years ago was very much like in that weird like cross between, like, I don't know, my main character in that was an offshoot of Botanica from the Beast Machines, if you know what I'm talking about. So I love that there's like a plant-based transformer. So that was really cool for me. And I've been building up a lot of ideas, which I think I even said in our announcement about like the scale of life concept, And Biollante, I feel like, is such an amazing representation of that, because Biollante's both grown, but sort of haphazardly, organically coalesces, and then at the same time also has spiritual components and microscopic. I don't know. There's so many different things going on with Biollante that I find fascinating, but a cool Muppet. I don't know. I feel like that's sort of top level.
Now, it's said that most great kaiju stories are built on their human cast, which I think you have a really strong grasp of, because in Biollante vs. Destroyah, I think Mina and Needles are two very memorable characters.
I really appreciate you for saying that, and I love them so much. There isn't typically an opportunity to return to those characters often in the Godzilla universe, but from IDW. But if I could go back to especially Dr. Mina Sham's story, I would love to do that. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
Out of curiosity, do you have a favorite human cast from a Godzilla movie?
Ooh. Dang, that's a good question. I kind of love the gay dads, who create Jet Jaguar.
Oh, yeah, them. I like them a lot, too.
My buddy wanted to pitch something with them in it, and I was like, oh no, I don't feel like it would be fair to me as a writer. Like, I don't feel like it would be fair to the fans for me as a writer, like as like a straight dude, to be like, yeah, let me write this gay dad book. Like, I mean, not that I couldn't write them, but I just felt like that was maybe somebody else's story to tell. But like, and I know that's not what they are, but like,
Yeah. We did
it's kind of a
include
fun
them in the Pride
interpretation of them.
video. We did
Yeah, that's what I'm
mention
saying,
them.
right? They're kind of great. Like, I love that whole trio with them and the kid. I forget their names right now, but they're so cool.
So one aspect that stuck out to me about Biollante versus Destroya was that while those while those two monsters are like very beloved in the fandom, they don't get as much of a spotlight as other monsters.
No, they
Um,
don't.
are there any like more obscure parts of either of these franchises, Godzilla or Sonic, that you have like a really strong affinity
Mm.
for?
Well, King Caesar definitely, as you've heard me talking about it. I can't remember if I pitched some King Caesar stuff. I think I've asked if I could pitch some King Caesar stuff. I don't think anybody said yes. It's not like there was like a strong demand for it. I think what they were doing, wasn't it just Mechagodzilla's 50th like a couple years ago, right? And I was like, Jake, like,
It's his
what if we
too.
did to our Godzilla editor? I was like, Jake, what if we did like a King Caesar 50th? They both appear in the movie at the same time. I was like, could be the fans might really need it, And Jake was like, right, I'll keep you posted, wink. But no, that's not what he said. I don't know what he said. I don't know if he replied actually. So shout out to him for that. But I I yeah. King Caesar definitely. I love with the Godzilla stuff. I don't know. Godzilla's an interesting thing because it's hard. It's hard for me to dream about doing anything with the very specific things I love from Godzilla lore that aren't specific to the comics because I don't want to get my hopes up because I know that they like to keep it very much original to the comics in terms of the stories they're telling in them and the characters they're using. When it comes to Sonic stuff, like deep Sonic stuff, I hadn't played Sonic Adventure previous to writing this story. And I believe it was Sega who said, let's put Station Square in there. And I really loved it. And I really loved that. I really loved, what's the name of it? I was just writing it the other day, but I forget the name. The casino, the underground casino stuff. That's really cool. Casino Land or something like that. I forget the exact name.
I think it's Casinopolis in that one. I might be
Yes, thank you. That's
misremembering.
it. Thank you. Yes, Casinopolis. I love that stuff. Is so much fun. Twinkle Park is so awesome, and I'm really lucky to be able to play with some of this stuff in this story. So I feel like in that regard, I got very lucky, where I happened into really loving and a kind of I don't know. Would you call that like a deep cut Sonic lore thing?
I think it's well known, but we don't get to see it as often as we'd like
Yeah, that's
to.
true. That's true. So I feel like I was really fortunate to be able to play around with that, especially because I think they also do try to limit. They try to be very restrained. My understanding that I'm not saying this is, remember, when I'm saying this, I'm not representing either of these companies in any way, all three of them actually. But my understanding is that, they tend to use a lot of restraint when they decide what game locations they're going to bring into the comics. And I was really thrilled that they were asking us to put Station Square into this. And it was really fun to do that. I really love that new Knuckles show. So I don't know. Again, I don't think that counts as a deep cut per se, but if there was a way to play with some of that stuff or write something set in that particular continuity, specifically, like if we could do a comic, like a sequel comic to the Knuckles show, I would love to do that because I just think it's like, I don't know, it's really cool. And puppets.
And kind of building off of stuff about Biollante versus Destroya, in that comic you did sort of flip the expected dynamic of the monsters on their head, that in fandom
Yeah.
Biollante gets looked at very sympathetically, Destroya is
Right.
looked at as evil because she is a baby killer a little bit.
It's not untrue, Destroyer's evil.
But you
normally.
crafted a scenario. You crafted a scenario where it makes perfect sense that Biollante would be the antagonist, and Destroya is kind of doing more of the hero work, even if unintentionally. And I really liked that.
Thank you. You are very kind. I don't know that many people phrased it as convincingly. I was convinced. I wrote it, but I don't. I don't know how effective I was with that. But I appreciate you saying that.
My question is, as a writer, how do you decide when you want to try to like invert expectations like that versus play a character or monster straight?
We were discussing this idea of taking wild swings earlier when you send in pitches or bring ideas to these comic books. And that I think is one of the things that excites me most about writing comic books. We have more latitude for doing big, weird ideas. Not saying that you can't do them in film, not saying we don't see them. Same with television. Obviously, novels do it all the time. But there's something very special about the way that comic books provide you a glimpse of a vision even if it's frozen in time, with really large concepts that don't necessarily seem like they're always going to work or line up. And I think part of the magic in comic books is taking that chance and seeing where it can go, seeing how far can we suspend disbelief effectively until we really butt right up to people's limit. And that's something I enjoy doing in everything, all the stories I tell. And it's something I was seeking to do with Biollante versus Destroyah. It's something which is more challenging this particular crossover, because I think that there's a hope that this is going to be as, and I'm using this as an example to explain when you choose to do it and when you choose to play it straight. I think there's an expectation from the rights holders in this, and to a degree from the publisher, that we could potentially be reaching a slightly larger audience than your average Sonic comic or average Godzilla comic is going to reach, because we're bringing the two of them together, and that's not always the same thing. Although I did learn from our announcement that it's a lot of the same thing, which made me so happy. But I think because of that, there have been instances, let's say, where in my original conceptualizations of this, in my wildest versions, I wasn't playing things quite as straight. We had a version where, I don't want to say it because maybe we'll still end up using that idea. And if we get to do more of this, let's just say we played around with scale. We played around with time. We played around with reality. We played around with visualization for the kaiju and the Sonic characters in a lot of our pitches. And a lot of those things were really exciting, but maybe were distractions from sort of the pure enjoyment of just mashing up these two things together, taking these two toy boxes and throwing them at each other, and hopefully as we move forward and there's a desire for more of this, we can experiment more with some of that subversion. And I do think that we still, to a degree, have some of that here, though it's hard for me to say because I'm so close to it. It might not be my place to claim whether we're effectively subverting anything here. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard. The line is really, in this case, when you're working on licensed comics, right? The line is what I want to do, which is subvert everything constantly all the time. And then the middle point is my editor saying, okay, we love your ambition. Maybe you don't need to subvert everything. Sonic doesn't have to turn orange and I don't know, drive like a chili dog blimp. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that was in a pitch, but if that was, that would be cool, right? But and then the rights holders are often like, look, let's be realistic. They're in the business of when you go to pick up their stuff, when you go to pick up their comics, from the rights holder is thinking, well, how does this line up with my merchandise I have? How does this line up with my film I have coming out? How does this, so they're in the game of trying to make things seem as consistent as possible. So the dance I do is going to my editors, hey, what if we really tried to annoy them and make things less consistent? And then my editors are like, okay, slow down. What if we just weren't trying to annoy them, but we did put in some suggestions there that were exciting? And then I'm like, okay, that's cool. So I think the answer is less when is the right time, and it's when am I being reined in enough that they haven't allowed all of my subversions to make it through. No. Look, the real truth is it's a case-by-case thing. And we are playful in this story in the way that we let certain characters do certain things. And for me in particular, I think because my girl Amy has been such a beacon for me as I'm writing this, I think maybe I subvert some of the expectations we typically have of her a little bit more than other characters, I would hope. We'll see how people feel about that. But I don't know, you're always trying to get your weirdest thing through, and then you gotta come to a compromise.
And we've just kind of touched on it a little bit where you talked about working with larger IP. You've taken on quite a few other projects, links to IPs with larger fandoms before, like the Transformers 2022 Beast Wars Annual. I'm very tongue-tied today, I'm sorry.
I like where you're going with Beast World. Let's do that.
And the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Halloween special.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about the process? I guess you kind of did a little bit, but I'm wondering, could you tell us a little bit about the process of going from like a fan or an enjoyer of an
Mm,
IP to then
mhm.
directly contributing to officially licensed material? Is there like a shift in perspective you sort of take?
There is definitely a shift in perspective. With Transformers, I had the world's most niche fandom, which is I just love Beast Machines. I have ever since it first came out. I know it's ugly, I know it's bizarre, but it's just really, I don't know, there's something about it that works for me. So when I had a when I had a chance to pitch on Transformers Beast Wars, I just knew I wanted to do a Beast Machines story or get as close to Beast Machines as I could. And I found something that got me there. So that was my fandom bringing me to that point. But what I had to be kind of realistic with myself about, kind of like I was talking about with the, how um, editors are often reining in um, wild subversions that might be distracting from the overall enjoyment of the story. I don't know. Maybe that's how, I don't know if that's how it is. Maybe that's where I'm at in my head nowadays. But yeah, I mean, they were like, look, we can't like do it exactly like that, but like maybe let's just like change the names. And I was like, cool, yeah, we'll do it like a campfire story. They changed the names. It's less of like a prophecy and more of like a cautionary tale. Like, maybe this could happen one day to Cybertron kind of thing. And it would look sort of like Beast Machines, but not really. And that was like, yeah, I think that tempered it didn't change my fandom of it, but it tempered my perspective on it, where it was like, okay, I can't just strictly write this as a fan. I have to consider Hasbro's going to want something, IDW is going to want something, and and I'm going to want something, and we've got to find the right balance there. Power Rangers was similar, although the Power Rangers story, it was a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and the first thing that we ended up settling on, or we needed to settle, rather, I should say, is who could be in the cast. So they had a very specific rule, which is very interesting when it comes to the fandom of Power Rangers, where, from my perspective, which is that it's the 5 core uh, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers from season 1 with Tommy, but Tommy has to be the Green Ranger, not the White Ranger. So, in your mind as a fan, that sets it in a very specific time period, like at the end of season 1, basically, where things are kind of lining up like that. And that led me to using the Mega Dragon Zord in my story, which was really fun to do because I was like, well, let's use the Zord that's specific to when he is the Green Ranger. That'll be really fun, or let's say the Zord, the Super Zord or Zord modification. But what else? What else was tempered in that process? I don't know. That one was a little bit different. I in the What I originally pitched for that Power Ranger story, Trini, I had a very different approach to Trini. One that I was writing, not even so much as a fan, but I was trying to, I guess, okay, so maybe this is an answer to your question for that. When it came time for me to write the story, and I know Trini was going to be, when I found out Trini was going to be my lead in that story, because it had been Kim, but they already had a Kim story, so we moved it to Trini, which made more sense anyway. So shout out to David for that suggestion. David Marriott, who edited that one. I've worked with David a lot. And how could I say, we didn't agree on the right, but it changed halfway through because David was with Boom, and then it was T. Funer who took over. And when T took over as the editor, I found out that Hasbro and Boom and T maybe wanted me to take a different approach to the voice I had for Trini. So as a writer, I was trying to get in the head of this character who's like, it's got to be very surreal to go from being like a high school student to like a garbed alien powered, like, I don't know, for lack of a better phrase, superhero, right? Basically. And you must be doing a lot of existential pondering like all the time. So I wrote I don't know if pessimistic is the word, but let's say I wrote a very skeptical Trini with a lot of existential pondering. And they were like, Nick, we love the idea. We love the giant corn cob monster. Let's make Trini like Halloween, and let's make Trini love her friends. And I was like, I see. Okay. It wasn't that Trini didn't like her friends, and it wasn't that Trini didn't, I was just trying to, I don't know. To me, as a writer, I thought it was really fascinating to put myself in this character's shoes and think like, this whole thing is so bizarre. Like, and like my friends just want to sit here and like watch a horror movie, but I can't stop constantly thinking about how I might have to transform into like a yellow morph suit, like monster truck driver. I don't know.
So, jumping back
Did I
to
answer the question? Did I
yeah,
just ramble?
I
I'm not
was, it was
sure.
definitely no, it's definitely interesting. I like hearing the process behind it. So jumping back a little earlier, as we said, the project was initially pitched in 2022, and the past few years have seen an interesting growth and change for both these franchises, which we did
Oh
touch on.
yeah.
And I think it's been in positive ways for both of them. But did that have any impact on the project? Any things
Oh
that had to be
yes.
like actively changed as the franchise changed?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Let me just say that I think that when we were when Sega really got serious about this, which is hard for me to put a timestamp on it, but let's say like a year and a half ago or something like that. 2 years, something like that, around there. I don't know. I can't remember. There's been so many drafts of this thing. I could wallpaper my house. I really am. My memory for it's not great. But when Sega really got serious, um, I Shadow hadn't always been a priority, let me say. And Sega was like, no, Shadow. And I was like, okay. It was kind of like that. They were like, no, Shadow. And I was like, all right, well, okay, so it's going to be Shadow. And there were a couple other characters who I had put in just from my enjoyment of them and their capabilities, let's say. And I that they were like, no, we're actually going to take those down or take them out of this plot because they're not going to fit for what our vision is for this. And so I can't speak to how other crossovers, stories, whatever, have developed for Sonic and Godzilla because I'm really only involved in the ones. For the most part, you're really the only involvement I've had are the ones that you're seeing come to print, right? I haven't really had much involvement behind the scenes in any of the other stuff, but or even deep knowledge of it, with the exception of my friends' Godzilla stories, and even that's really cursory. But there were things, Mogera was originally in my plot, and that was actually editor requested. And then I think Mogera ended up getting used quite a bit over the course of like I want to say like 23 and 24, I believe. And at some point, it just we were just like, I don't know if this fits anymore. Which we kind of seen Mogera recently after not seeing Mogera used a lot, and like so we kind of rethought that. There was a time when other characters, let's say, from other characters from Godzilla's world were thought to really be a priority for this, and I think that those got used in different ways in the in between times, and it just made sense for us to maybe not use them in the way we'd envisioned to use them. There was one particular Sonic character that was incredibly crucial to the plot structure of my story that they ended up asking us to take out, but who did end up getting used in some of the other crossover stuff that we've seen. And I don't know if it was because of the crossover. I don't know if it was because of the limitations that they envisioned for this particular story. I can't speak to that. But yeah, there were. Yeah. Yeah.
In an earlier interview, you did put a focus on Amy and Mothra. Were there any specific character and monster interactions you were excited to write?
I'll let her join us for this. Other specific ones. Yes, there's a moment that I had included. This moment has probably been in there from. This is the one thing that probably hasn't changed from all the drafts, which is a really cool action moment that I've been dreaming of since I think I even pitched it on my call. I think I was like, yes, we got to have this in it. And I'm not going to say who the interactions between, but I am going to say that everybody involved liked the interaction so much that it went from being something that happened earlier on, maybe like issue 2, to going into our final issue as being like a centerpiece moment. And I'm so excited about it. I just, in my revision to number 4 I just sent off, I just added a scene that was an interaction I didn't even know I wanted so bad until I did it. And now I'm so happy that I did it. I feel like it was like maybe like a glaring omission of mine that I hadn't conceived this interaction before. And yeah, and I think I spoke about briefly in our announcement stuff about Eggman's goals. And his goals have always largely been trained focused on the same kaiju, and I always wanted that interaction. I know people can guess what it is. It's fun to tease it, but it's obvious what it's going to be. But yeah, I there's a lot of interactions I really wanted to get in there. Amy and Mothra was something that kind of developed as I was writing. It wasn't even intentional. It was just like, oh, these two, they really complement each other well. They really have different things that they bring to it that can work together well. And I just, I loved figuring that out. But it's tough when you write kaiju, like they're not good guys or bad guys, really. To kind of go back to what we were talking about with Biollante and Destroyah and subverting expectations of the characters, from my perspective at least. They're forces of nature, but they're forces of nature who can look at you. They're forces of nature who can yell at you. They're forces of nature who could destroy you, right? But they do it consciously, as opposed to, I don't necessarily think we have any understanding of a windstorm as being conscious. Maybe we'll discover that in 1,000 years or whatever. But as we conceptualize it now, the kaiju is the closest thing to, I guess you could say, the weather that's thinking. Like when Godzilla does something, like there's so many environmental ramifications that occur, but that is a choice that Godzilla is making from my perspective as a writer. And it's interesting to write interactions between characters who are individuals, like Sonic, who's saying, I'm going to run over there now, and Godzilla, who is thinking, from my perspective, Godzilla angry, right? Like it's not going to be on the page saying that, but I'm imagining that's sort of Godzilla's thought process. And Godzilla makes a conscious choice, but when Sonic makes a conscious choice, the interaction that Sonic has with something, typically, obviously Sonic's got fantastic abilities, and depending on the scale of power, it can be, have earth-shaking ramifications. But Godzilla can like breathe, and it has environmental ramifications. So in general, those are just fun interactions to cook up, because just by virtue of a kaiju's existence, they are disruptive.
So Toho and Sega are both well known to their fan bases about being a little particular about how they want their characters depicted. They want to make sure they're treated with respect and they're depicted a certain way. You've spoken a little bit about rules you had to adhere to and changes that were requested, like what version of Mechagodzilla was being used.
Right. Yep.
Were there any difficulties or interesting compromises that had to be made to make both companies happy?
Wouldn't you love to know? To make both companies happy. Sega and Toho are at very different stages, let's say, of their storytelling, and I'm in a very different position to what I've been in before in writing the story, in which it was decided at some point that this was kind of going to be. They both obviously have approval on everything that we do, but Toho's one, I think they're quite focused on this main line, that what's that, Keisei era that they're doing right now in the books, and we're kind of not really affiliated with that stuff. Like we're just kind of like this is a little fun like pocket story, for Godzilla and the kaiju as of right now. We'll see how that changes as things move on. But Toho is very chill with us. They're like, yeah, cool. Toho in general is very cool about having different interpretations in the comics, because I think that because we can't bring things over from the films, and because what they're doing with the Minus series isn't something we're seeing in the comics, and because the Monsterverse stuff is completely different, that's over with Legendary and stuff like that. That's not even in the same. You can't even conceptualize that stuff in terms of what Toho's doing with IDW. They're just so chill at the moment, I think, about lots of different interpretations. So I think as long as the characters are visually meeting Toho's criteria, which is things like, rows of fins and toes and stuff like that, and certain actions, which I know kaiju are and are not allowed to do, which is like, Godzilla's not just gonna like pull up a chair and sit down and have a conversation with you. Like I'm not writing that into the script, and with my familiarity with working with Toho before. I know, and I saw a lot of this stuff in Godzilla Monster Island Summer Camp as well, because Rosie's writing it, so I'm overhearing a lot of the stuff that's going on. So I've heard a lot of things in terms of what Toho feels like are appropriate for the kaiju. I kind of knew what I was getting into with a lot of those interactions, and that's been like, generally I found them to be very just very open right now. Whereas Sega, I think, views this, they've got such a rich continuity with the IDW books, and we are not specifically, I don't know that you're going to pick up the main Sonic book and see the events of our story reflected in that. But I think, because I think that they want this to be quite like general audience, right? Like not necessarily like strict to continuity. But with that said, there's a lot of things to adhere to in terms of what makes IDW Sonic, right? So making sure that all of that stuff can be there, and making sure that Toho's basic rules can be there. I wouldn't say that we had to negotiate something per se to make both companies happy, but it's more like, as a writer, you've got to be mindful that there are limitations. That's the nature of working with licensed comics, but you got to make sure that your one franchise's limitations don't cause you to do something that violates the other one's limitations. And I can't say we had a significant occurrence of any of that. It's funny because I'll see people like talking about mandates and stuff. It's less like mandates and it's more like character specific rules, or kind of like, this is how we see Sonic's world working best for this story. It's not like, I have not encountered it where it's like very hard and fast things, with the exception of like a very few specific things which don't even come into play here. So I don't know that we had any sort of like real difficulty getting the two companies to agree to anything that's in the story. I think that by the nature of the writing process, Tia and Bixie sort of are already trying to filter all of that before it even goes out to either company. But I will say that part of why this took a while, I think, is that both companies needed to feel like this was the right crossover for them. And that wasn't something that they necessarily always felt from the start. Maybe it was because it was me doing it. I don't know, because I wasn't somebody who had worked with Sonic before, and Sega's quite careful about who works on the Sonic comics. So maybe there was some apprehension in that area. And just in general, I think, this project came to these companies at a time when they were really developing their future slates quite intensely. And I think they were like, does this fit in with what we're trying to do? And then eventually they were like, okay, it does. That's my perspective, by the way. Nobody said that to me.
And currently, seems like Toho and Sega are happy to work together. Obviously, like a year ago, it was like, oh, Godzilla's in Monkey Ball. But most recently, it was Godzilla and friends appearing in Sonic Rumble. Did that take you by surprise? And how did you react to that?
It did. They, Sega really runs a tight ship. And that was not something that I knew anything about before it happened. I don't know when development began. My guess is our development, my wishful thinking is that Sega was so profoundly moved by my passion for this story and my determination to get it made, and constant the editors constantly being like, the guy won't leave us alone, he really wants to do this crossover, what's his deal? Like, that they were like, maybe we got something here. No, I genuinely don't know it. I don't know how the Rumble stuff came about, but I was surprised, and it's cool. But I do have to say, I am not even privy to any of the Rumble. Even now, I still know nothing about that other than what you've seen in the trailer. So, yeah, it's, we're not Rumble affiliated. Are they going to pick up some threads from what we've done? I don't know. That would be cool. I would be honored if they did.
And just for clarity, from the covers, the current lineup that it looks like on the Sonic side, we have Sonic, Tails, Amy, Knuckles, and Eggman. You mentioned Shadow a couple times. Is he?
He has been. There are different versions of what's been conveyed about the book, and the only reason I'm comfortable speaking about Shadow is because it has been openly mentioned that Shadow is in this in some of the coverage that we've had so far. I guess maybe in a press release or something like that went out. So yeah, Shadow's there.
And on the Godzilla side, we have Godzilla, Mothra, and Heisei Mechagodzilla slash Super Mechagodzilla, whatever people like to call that version.
Yeah.
Um, and that's everyone we can confirm for right now.
I will not be able to confirm anything else, but let me say that I think the best way to describe it. Okay, I'm gonna give you an example. Okay, when I go to a pizza place, my favorite thing to do from a pizza place first, I just want a plain cheese pizza. Okay. I and not saying that I like all other kinds of pizzas. All right. But except for barbecue chicken, I've never really warmed up to that one. But I like to test the pizza place with the cheese pizza, which is not to say that it should be simple. It's that the pure flavors, the essence of that pizzeria should come through in the cheese pizza. That's how I feel about it. I want to know, what's that crust taste like? I want to know, how good is that sauce? I want to go, what's this cheese bun like? How is this all? How long are they keeping it in the oven? Are they doing anything when they take it out? They brushing the crust at the end. I want to know all those things. So imagine I'm making you a pizza, and this pizza is called Sonic Godzilla. Okay. And in this pizza that I'm making for you, I've decided I'm gonna make you a cheese pizza. Okay. Now, am I hitting that crust with a little garlic butter at the end, a la Shadow? Yeah, I am, right? But like, do I want the pure deliciousness of how good this pizza is going to be to really just like knock you back, so that if we do get an opportunity to move into a sequel, a threequel, the Sonic Godzilla universe, a virtual reality. Now we all live in a world that's Sonic Godzilla 24/7. We're in the Matrix and we're in the Sonic Godzilla thing. If that happens, let's say, we can start to we get some of those crazy toppings in there, like, some of those kaiju, they're like a spicy pepperoni, some of those Sonic characters, maybe that's like putting pineapple on your pizza. Are you ready for it? I don't know if you can handle it, but let's just say I'm trying to do the tastiest, most classic version with this. So what you see in the confirmation is what I'm focused on. And anything that we get to do beyond this is going to be toppings on the pizza.
For Sonic fans, if they're interested in either getting into Godzilla or just preparing for the crossover, is there any specific piece of Godzilla media you would recommend?
Any of the Toho stuff is good. I mean, spiritually, let's say, this isn't necessarily going to like align with Godzilla from 1954. You know what I mean? Like, that's not, we're doing a more colorful, more playful version. In my head, I'm always writing Godzilla from Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. I think that's 74, right? I'm always writing that version, because that to me is just like, he's fun, but he's also like deadly. I like that. I'm not saying that's what you're seeing on the page. I'm saying that's where I'm coming from. So if you enjoy the playful spirit of a goofy Godzilla, which I'm not saying ours is goofy, by the way, but if you enjoy that, I think that's a fun movie to watch for it. Tokyo SOS is just cool and weird. I would say watch that. Watch GMK, because I think that's going to give you some of the vibes that we're going for here. Read my Godzilla Rivals comic, so you can be like, this guy's a hack. Like, he sucked when he wrote that, and he sucked when he wrote this. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like I feel like you can do any of it. But just remember that if you are going into the Monsterverse stuff, like the modern American films or modern international productions, let's say, that those, you're not going to see that version of Godzilla here, because that's just not the one that we have the rights to work with. That's over at a different publisher. So, I would go anything up to Final Wars, I think, is like, in terms of the films, is going to make you feel like you could imagine those characters interacting in this.
And for Godzilla fans, same situation. Any piece of Sonic media you would recommend?
It's time to crack out your PS3s, go to the PSN, and buy Sonic Adventure and play it, because I want you to feel like you are, I want you to have a little, I want you to have a little, like, I want you to feel like you're going back to Station Square. I don't want you to be there for the first time. Come on, play, get that. You can still download it right now. I believe it's still available. I mean, I bought it to write it.
Yeah,
So
it's on
I
Steam.
imagine it's
so
still
it's
there.
it's
Yeah.
got.
Oh, it's on Steam. That's great. So yeah, I mean, go play that game. It's so much fun. I mean, I don't know. Again, like you can be like, you can play it and then be like, he's doing it wrong. He's not writing Station Square right. That's fine with me. I don't mind if you hate it, you know. But we're trying to make something really special for you here. So I think it will be fun as a Godzilla fan to kind of like, also like, I just love like when you go back to different eras of gaming, it's like that with film, but gaming's more immersive, you know. So it's fun to like, you know, you're in that chunky little like CG era. It's fun to kind of get that. I don't know. Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it. But really, when it comes to Sonic, I mean, our core cast is pretty classic. Like, I think most Godzilla fans are gonna have a familiarity with this. I don't know. Play Sonic and Mario with the Olympic Games, and then I don't know. Tell me if I did it right. Do you know what I mean? Like, whatever you want's fine. Although I do like that game. I do like the skateboarding in the 2020 version. Very good.
I just thought of this because we brought up Station Square a few times. I don't know when you playing it for the first time. I don't know if you got to the ending of it. In my head, though, I'm
No, no,
like,
no, no. I was more caught up in the writing. I did not get all the way to the end of Sonic
okay,
Adventure. If that's what you're asking now.
but I was thinking about the ending of Sonic Adventure, and I imagine the people in Station Square being like, "Ah, again."
Yeah, I know. I know. Look, it's such a weird dance that we have to do with these things. And you also got to understand, like, as a comic book writer, yes, I get deep fandoms for these things, whether I'm coming to them with deep fandom or embracing it. And honestly, I would have to say at this point, I'm becoming a big fan of the Sonic fandom. Does that make any sense? Like, I love the fans. They're so great. They're so playful. They're so like passionate, and it's very inspiring. But you know, writing comic books doesn't make you a whole lot of money. You know, it's like, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So at some point, I got to limit. I gotta say, okay, this is the line I'm gonna go to for this project. And with this one, I was like, I'm gonna get in there. I'm gonna experience the things I really need to experience for the context of this. Um, but you know, I own a small comic shop in the town where I live, here in Los Angeles. So between that and my comic book writing, I don't have time to be doing a whole lot of gaming. So no, unfortunately, I didn't make it to I didn't make it to the very end. And I know what could be there. Trust me, I'm aware of what could be there. Um, Let me just say there are so many things that I would love to explore in this combination. And if you guys come along on this journey with us and you show IDW and Sega and Toho that you enjoy what we've done, if you love what we've done, because obviously I'm not saying you have to like it, but I'm trying to do right by you. And if you enjoy what we've done and you let them know you want to see more of it, hopefully we can continue to bring in more of those elements that are going to make you, the same kind of thing you're already talking about right there with the ending of Sonic Adventure. Hopefully we can get to some of that stuff.
So for people wanting to get familiar with your writing in specific, is there any particular book you wrote that you might recommend? I was introduced through the Godzilla Rivals issue, but I know you have a pretty long career. You have indie books, like even before this.
Yeah,
Anything you'd
I've done a
recommend in
lot
particular?
of done a lot of indie stuff. Um, you know, I think the thing I've wrote, which isn't even has I haven't even finished posting it on Webtoon yet. The thing I've wrote, which is most spiritually aligned with this, is probably Cute Crew. I really enjoyed doing that story, and I'm not going to claim that it's going to be the Webtoon that's going to change your life or knock your socks off. And maybe that's not even the best way to read it. Maybe the best way to read it is like, I think at some point we did put out some PDFs that you could download of it because it was made as a comic book and then turned into a Webtoon. Um, but Cute Crew has a lot of elements. I'm playing with. We have a giant squid monster in it that is very kaiju-esque. We've got a bunch of koalas on a submarine working together, and to have some team dynamics that are reminiscent of Team Sonic. And so I think that there's kind of like some things there that I find analogous that I feel like if you're excited for this, maybe check out Cute Crew and see if that flows. I also did a story called The Evil Life with my same collaborator as I did on Cute Crew, Nils Petter Norlin, a Swedish artist. And I really love The Evil Life. I love what we did there. I think some of the sense of humor from that is probably similar to the kind of sense of humor I'm bringing to Sonic Godzilla. My other stuff, I don't know if it's quite as direct of a line. Those ones are a little bit more out there, a little bit more in my superhero bag than this stuff is. So yeah, I would say check out those two on Webtoon. Yeah, I think you can also just download The Evil Life for free from my website. We're still trying to get Cute Crew picked up by a publisher. So that one is not, I don't believe there's like a massive free download for that one, but we'll see what happens. After I finish up my scripts for Sonic Godzilla, I'm going to go wrap up the last chapter or so of Cute Crew. So that'll be on the horizon coming up soon. So hopefully by the time this book's coming out in July, I'll have finished posting the end of Cute Crew. And maybe if we're lucky, we'll find a cool publisher to work with on that who wants to bring you that 160-page koalas versus squids story.
And for any curious viewers, just because you've been in the industry for quite some time, any advice you have to anyone who wants to get into the industry?
Be passionate about comics, because constantly every day it's going to test your determination to be doing this. If you think to yourself, well, there's something I like just as much as I like comics, unless you're like supremely talented, I would recommend you go towards that other thing for your mental health and financial benefit. Comics I was saying to my friends over the weekend when I was at the comic shop, I was like, I don't know, do I just like rejection? Is that like something that do I enjoy it? Because I feel like my career is like, it's about being able to handle rejection really well. And then you get to do some fun stuff occasionally, but mostly it's the rejection. There's a lot of rejection in comics. A lot of people say no to you. And you've got to be able to put that rejection in its place contextually and understand that it doesn't mean that they don't think you're capable of telling a good story for them. It doesn't mean that there isn't a version of your vision. It doesn't mean that they could never believe in your vision. It just means that you got to continue refining it. You got to continue going back, finding a better way to do it, find a better way to communicate, find a better way to get those big ideas down on the page and persuade them that this really is going to be something that editors are going to enjoy, readers are going to enjoy, these companies are going to feel comfortable with. So yeah, it's tricky. Let me get a little more tea while I'm thinking about this. I would say if you haven't made comics yet, your number one step is to just make a comic. There's nothing else to it other than to do it. And it doesn't matter the quality, just make the comic. You would not believe how bad my early comics were. Just horrible, horrible stuff. And that's okay, because that's how we learn how to do this. This isn't a field where you need to get an education in it. In fact, I would recommend you don't go to college for something like this. Not that you can't learn wonderful things from it, you can. But I don't know that it's going to give you a leg up in the business by doing that.
And final question, just because we both love the medium of comics. I know you said you're busy. I also think it's very cool you have your own comic book shop. I love that a lot.
Thanks. It's a little small thing. We're just open on the weekends.
But my question that I try to ask other writers, what's on your pull list? What books are you reading right now?
My pull list, because I run a shop, I don't really have a pull list in quite the same way anymore. We're not a shop that gets in. We don't order from the distributors. We're almost like a comic book thrift store. We're really working up, because it's a tiny space in a larger art market, and we're so fortunate to have some benefactors who've donated collections to us, and even some new stuff to us that we really greatly appreciate. So having a pull list is not something that I feel like I'm capable of doing in the same way that I used to. However, at my comic shop that I shop at the most here in LA, well, and specifically in Long Beach, Pulp Fiction Long Beach, I believe that Rosie and I are currently subscribed to Witch Hat Atelier and Way of the House Husband. And I think Mashal, though I can't remember if Mashal's ended yet, if we have the final volume yet. So yeah, our pull list is manga at this point, oddly enough. But what am I reading? Like, what am I keeping up with to make sure I know really well? I'm really enjoying the X-Men, adjectiveless X-Men. Jed McKay and Netho Diaz is the primary artist. Although Tony Daniel just did a couple of really great issues recently. I really like that X-Men book. It's like, that's kind of my Wednesday waiting for one at this point. It's funny because if I would have never thought that was going to be the book I'd really get into, but there's just something about the slow burn character development that's going on in there that's hitting for me, In general, I'm enjoying the X-Men line. I'm really excited for this. What's it? X-Men United that's about to drop. Oh man, I'm so excited for that. On the DC side, I'm really keeping an eye on Poison Ivy because our customers love Poison Ivy so much. We even have like a specific section that we basically at first set up as a Poison Ivy section and then expanded to some of DC's other like badass babes. just because that's been something that we have a lot of young queer customers come in and they want to buy gifts for their partners and friends, and that's just kind of what they gravitate towards. So it's been really fun to keep up with that and sort of encourage them. Oh, and I'm really enjoying right now, especially, oh man, this week's issue or last week's issue of Batman by Fraction and Jimenez. Oh man, Batman #7 was so good.
I want to thank you again so much for for agreeing to be interviewed.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate you. It was really fun to talk to you about this stuff. I hope this goes well. People like it.
And I'm gonna put links to Nick's websites and socials in the description. Everyone should go follow and check out Nick's stuff. Thanks again to Nick for being willing to sit down with me and talk about this. Again, links to all of Nick's social media and website in the description. I also want to shout out my patrons, and a special shout out to my $5 patrons: Ned Rex, Nate DM990, Diddly Do, Queer Kaiju, Ice Cream Fork, New Ray, Savvy M, and Johnny Hedgewolf. See y'all in the next video.